So welcome everyone to this month's webinar associated with this program, the Jyotish Journey Article Subscription Program. Of course, the topic will be on the topic of the article, which was on Pushkar Navamsha. But as usual, we'll just be discussing the charts in general for any interesting learning points. So let's start out just by reviewing how many Pushkar Navamshas are there. Who can tell me how many Pushkar Navamshas are there in total? No one can tell me this.
24, Mark. 24 Pushkar Navamshas are there.
So 24 Pushkar Navamshas. There's 2 for each sign. And the way to remember them is by the element of the sign. So we have fire signs, earth signs, air signs, water signs. So in the fire signs, which Navamshas of fire signs become Pushkar Navamshas?
7 and 9.
The 7th Navamsha of fire and the 9th Navamsha. And does anybody recall what degree exactly would be the Pushkar Bhag? Pushkar Bhag
21
of fire. 21 degrees.
20.
Good. 21.
21
Then
degrees.
21 degrees, good. And then in earth signs, what would be the Pushkar Navamshas?
3rd and 5th.
3rd and 5th?
Third and fifth.
3rd and 5th, and then the exact degree of Pushkar Bhag in earth?
14.
14. So now coming to air signs, which Navamsh in air signs?
6th and 8th.
6 and 8.
6 and 8, and then the exact degree of Pushkar Bhag for air signs?
24.
24.
24, right. And then lastly, water signs, Pushkar Navamsh?
First and third.
1st and 3rd. And then the Pushkar Bhag,
7 degrees.
7 degrees.
7 degrees.
So as we look at charts today, I'm going to be asking students to try to identify planets or the degree of the ascendant in Pushkar Bhag without seeing the Navamsha first. Okay. And then also identify any planets that might actually be at the exact degree of a Pushkar Bhag. Okay. And since, the majority of the charts that I was showing in the article had to do with charts of well-known people, public figures, I'm going to actually focus on charts that I've worked on, that I've given predictions on, some of which where the idea of Pushkar Navamsha came into play. I gave a few of these at the end of the article as people, but we're going to look at more here. So without further ado, let me share screen. And oops, that didn't work. Let me share screen. And in a moment, people should be seeing a document that shows a chart with Libra Lagna. Would someone confirm?
Yeah, Mark. 1221.
Yes.
Right. So take a moment to consider the different degrees of the different grahas here and see if you can identify any planets that are in Pushkar Navamshas. No one?
Mars, possibly.
Rahu and Venus?
Who said this? Who said this? Yes. Venus at, can people hear me? I think I have a Can people hear me?
Yes, Mark.
I can hear
Yes,
you,
Mark.
but-
We can hear you.
Occasionally you're cutting out though, or at least
Yeah,
on
you're
my.
cutting out. Yeah.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Sorry about that. So yes, Venus and Rahu are both our Pushkar Navamsha. Now, you may remember from the article that when the Lagna Lord, or the degree of the Lagna, is in a Pushkar Navamsha, all other things being considered, this would be rather a favorable factor in a chart. And Venus, of course, in this case, is the Lagna Lord. Where does it go in the Navamsha at 2012 of Leo?
7th. Swakshetra in Libra.
Yes, it's in its own sign, right? It's in its Mula sign in Navamsha, so has that strength that way. And then, of course, which house does Libra rule in the birth chart? Rules the good first house, right?
First house, yes.
So it's under these conditions, according to the theory, that this Venus planet is capable of giving some very good, very auspicious results, will give its results strongly. Now, you could have predicted that just based on the fact that it goes to its Mula Trikona sign in the Navamsha, right? But the idea here is that because it's also in Pushkar Navamsha, then that would be even more so. And what favorable type of yoga does Venus form here?
Dhana
First
yoga.
Lord in the 11th.
But
It's a good done yoga, right?
With the 11th Lord.
Yeah, the first Lord, the Lakshmi Sthana Lord, goes to the 11th house with the 11th Lord.
Aspect by Jupiter.
Yes, Rahu's there. And even if you use Chandra Lagna, use the position of the moon, strong Chandra Lagna, because the moon's in its own sign Cancer, now these planets, it would be a strong benefic in the second house with the sun now as the second Lord, right? And she ran the Venus major period at a very good time of life for 20 years, right? You can see she was born, the moon is in Saturn's nakshatra, so she had some portion of Saturn, followed by the 17 years of Mercury, Ketu, and then Venus, which has been through most of her midlife. And true to the done yoga giving results of Venus, this Pushkar Navamsha planet that's also in its Mula Trikona sign in Navamsha, she's been quite affluent during this time. I've known this person now over a period of 24 years or so. She's never had to work. She's been independently wealthy. I really don't know the source of her wealth. She may have had, a trust fund from family money or something, but she's been quite affluent and lived a very affluent lifestyle. Lives in Southern California here in a home near the ocean that I'm sure is worth millions with a swimming pool. Dresses extremely fashionably, always goes on a lot of foreign trips. So very, very affluent lifestyle, all during the Venus major period. Of course, that was followed by the 6 years of the sun. So for a period of 26 years in a row, she gets the benefit of this good done yoga. With this planet in Pushkar Navamsha, of course, Rahu is also in Pushkar Navamsha, right? Also in the 7th Navamsha of fire signs. So both her Venus and the Rahu here are in Pushkar Navamsha. Is it clear? Any questions about this particular example? Now you notice, yeah, hold on, let me just, before you take a question, notice that I was looking at what sign in Navamsha the Pushkarna planet falls, and then what sign is that covering as a house in the birth chart. Keep this idea in mind. Remember this from the article? All right, someone else had a question or a comment?
Yeah, Mark, I have a quick comment. Here, the Venus goes to exactly the Pushkar Bhaga to close to 21 degrees.
First, I'm glad you highlighted that. It's not just a planet in Pushkar Navamsha, that it's a planet at the nearly the exact degree, right? Which is something we should pay attention to as well. Rahu, not as much so. Okay, good. Anything
Mark,
else?
it's George here. So when you mentioned trust fund, essentially that's essentially inheritance, right? And see how Venus is also the 8th word, and in the 8th house you have the 2nd word of wealth. So that basically connects to someone else's money.
It's true, and there's a pretty strong Kendra Sambandha between those two besides Mars aspecting, right? And so, yes, she's, she at one point when she graduated school before she got married, she did work a position, right? But, she's been very affluent all her whole life and really hasn't had to work for that. So it's been money from other sources. So this is a good comment, Georgie. Anything else before we move on? Okay. So again, I'm presenting a chart here. And do we see any planets or any degree of Lagna in Pushkar Navamsha?
Jupiter.
Yes. Jupiter is in the 3rd Navamsha of a Earth sign, Taurus. So it is a planet in Pushkar Navamsha. And what is Jupiter's position in Navamsha?
Close to Pisces. Close to Pisces, the one house.
Yes, right? So again, we have a similar situation that we saw previously in the sense that it's the Lagna Lord. It's in Pushkar Navamsha and goes to in a Swakshetra in the Navamsha in Pisces. And then which house of the horoscope is Pisces in the birth chart?
Fourth.
Of course, it's a good angular house, right? Now, what's different about this Jupiter is obviously it's the 1st and 4th Lord, but goes to the 6th house, right? And on the unfavorable side, I mean, it has its favorable features here, but on its unfavorable side, what sort of yoga and yoga results could it give in its periods or sub-periods?
Mark, it is forming an Ava Yoga with Saturn, the 2nd Marka Lord in the 1st house and the 1st Lord in the 6th.
Good.
So it is forming, so it could do some bodily harm or something, health problem.
Good, Duran. So he sees that, you can call it a generic Arishta Yoga. It's the technical term in Balagipika for when the Lagna Lord goes to 6, 8, or 12, and there's additional malefic influence either on the Lagna or the Lagna Lord itself. Then this can give a Ava Yoga, Arishta Yoga, which can pose danger to the health, to the body when it's activated in the Dasha sequence. And actually, this is a chart that I made a prediction about, not to the person, or actually I hinted at it to the person. I actually, this is the chart of a Russian student of mine. I actually commented about a negative potential that I saw in the Venus-Jupiter period to this other student that unfortunately came true. What unfortunate or unfavorable type of event could have happened in the major period of Venus and the sub-period of Jupiter?
Accident.
Why would you say this?
Disease.
Hold on. Just let me go to that first comment. Why would you say
Yeah,
accident? And what kind of accident? Do you have any? Do you have any further thought?
I said it because the Karka, your vehicle accident.
But why accident? Why are you seeing accident?
Is there? Yeah. Because Mars is aspecting it with its
Mars is
8th
aspecting.
aspect, and Yeah, that's. And again,
Well, first of all,
the
congratulations.
yeah, the sixth house, the lord of the sixth house.
Am I breaking up? You seem to be breaking up. Am I breaking up?
Yeah, breaking.
She's breaking up for me, and you're okay, Mark.
Okay. So first of all, what she's saying is correct. What I saw the potential for in the Venus-Jupiter period was a vehicular accident or a vehicular accident that could then result in some personal injury.
Yeah, Mark, because Venus, Jupiter, Dasha, from the Dasha Lagna, Jupiter is 8th. Then it's also in the 6th house. Venus is Karaka, Mars aspects Karaka.
You see,
And Venus is 8th.
well, first of all, hold on. First of all, this is a very good Venus in certain ways because it's in its own sign Vargotama in the 11th house. And this has been a very prosperous period for him where he has income from multiple sources. So that's been a very good side of this, okay? But of course, Venus for Sagittarius doesn't just rule the 11th, it rules the 6th, right? Now, the
Mark,
potential.
Venus
just a
is in
moment.
Mars's nakshatra, right?
Just a moment. Let me finish, okay? And then I'll ask for comments. Then I'll ask for comments. So, first of all, the potential for vehicular accidents is very clear since Jupiter is not just the Lagna Lord, but it's also the sixth Lord. I'm saying the fourth Lord going to the sixth house of accidents. Now, what you mentioned is correct. Mars in natural malefics is actually in the fourth house, natural karaka of accidents. And it's also aspecting Venus, the sixth Lord, right? And so the potential for vehicular accidents in Venus-Jupiter, not just vehicular accidents, but because Jupiter is also the Lagna Lord involved in this Ava Yoga, there was the potential for injury, which unfortunately is what happened. And actually, he broke an arm, but really the more severe injuries were spinal injuries, vertebrae type, tract vertebrae type injuries. Actually made rather a remarkable recovery. He owns a Hatha Yoga center, does Hatha Yoga himself, asana, and made a rather full and remarkable recovery with the aid of yoga and some other therapeutic approaches. That's the good news. But one reason I want to talk about this because you have this Jupiter who, as a sub-period lord, brought this very unfortunate incident. But overall, if you saw the vehicles that he drove, that he drives, that I've actually been in, because he hosts me in a place called Tambov when I go to Russia, have been really quite substantial and quite high end and quite expensive, either almost like a tank. It's a special sort of Toyota SUV that he drives like a maniac, and which I always was worried that he would at someday get into an accident in. But so I wanted to show this example in particular because, again, planets in Pushkar Navamsha, that alone will not ensure that a planet gives favorable results. Like everything in a chart, additional things depend upon other factors and in the overall condition and disposition within that planet is.
And like you taught us, everything happens together. I mean, it's all simultaneously going to happen. Everything shows up, like you said.
But in a general, but he's a very Jupiterian individual. You notice that, a saving grace here, actually, anything that the ninth Lord touches, even if the ninth Lord itself is not particularly well placed, anything the ninth Lord touches it helps to modify any negativity that might come from that planet. And you can see here that this sun is also aspecting this Jupiter. And it is forming something of what are called a Raja Lakshana Yoga, and it has these qualities. And what makes this ninth Lord sun strong? Anybody see? What's the source of strength for the sun?
It's in Pushkar Navamsha.
It's in Leo in the.
That's correct. It goes to its own sign in Navamsha, as you can see here. Right? So both this Jupiter, the Lagna Lord, and the sun which do form a 1-9 combination along the 6-12 axis, but do form a 1-9 combination, both have sources of strength in the Navamsha.
Mark, this person, was he involved in any temple building since Jupiter, Sun, the Raja Lakshana, and also
It's an interesting comment. In a way, yes. Okay, in a way, yes. He has been. It can be a combination for that, as you seem to be aware, and yes. He's involved in, his guru is Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. He's involved in the art of living. He's an art of living instructor. As I said, he owns a yoga studio, amongst other enterprises. Very enterprising individual. You can see the third lord in the first here, kind of sambandha with Mars, Mars aspecting the 10th house. A very enterprising individual, quite young still. I don't think he's crossed the age of 30, and he's done a lot in his young life to date. But yes, he has been involved in temple building to a degree.
Mark, you had mentioned that he had some good fortune in the sense with the accident that he was able to do Hatha yoga. But with Jupiter being retrograde, it wouldn't come from that, and the fact it would contribute to the health and accident. I was wondering if that Pushkar Navamsha was that grace.
Well, as I said in the article, these things are hard to tease out. It's hard to see what astrological factor contributed to what. Because as Sandeep was saying, you've got a variety of sort of things here. So my answer is I don't know. What I do know is that he really has had quite a remarkable recovery. Because he had some, he broke his back, essentially, as a result of this accident. And but he's fully recovered. He actually sent me a picture of the X-rays that show that his back is completely healed. So something good happened there, right? All right, we're going to move on. So see this chart. Which planet or planets are in Pushkar Navamsha?
Mars.
Mercury.
Yes. Well, you should have kept quiet on this one, Trang, but okay. Yes, Mars here at, remember in the air signs, it's the 6th and the 8th Navamsha are Pushkar Navamshas, and actually 24 degrees is a Pushkar Bhag. So, and about this Mars, as far as this particular chart, what do we notice about this Mars as being, what sort of status does Mars have in this chart?
Yoga
Yoga
Karaka.
Karaka. Yeah.
Yoga Karaka. Now it's the 10th lord in the 12th. It's the 10th lord in the 12th, conjunct Saturn. This conjunction with Saturn is a trine lord, 5th lord Mars, with an angle lord, 7th lord Saturn. So that does form a Raja Yoga. And when I teach beginning students, it's sometimes surprising to them to learn that, Raja Yogas, angle trine combinations forming in trick houses will actually give the results of Raja Yoga. Of course, their placement in a particular house will have meaning. And so someone needs to mute their mic. I'm getting some, noise in the background, please. If you're not speaking, please mute your mic. Julie, could I ask you to do that? Julie Gordon, could I ask you to mute your mic, please?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, please, thank you. I haven't know that, thank you. All right. So what could the meaning be of the 10th Lord Yoga Karaka planet in the 12th forming a Raja Yoga with Saturn? What could that mean?
Success in foreign countries.
Yes, yes. This person, I think, mentioned starting in the moon period, actually, which is, of course, its dispositor is this Mars. It's the Lagna Lord in the 10th. And then, going on into the Mars period, and now running Rahu, giving the results of Mars. They've been all during this period involved in foreign travel and business in a foreign country. I'm not that clear on the details, but I think they are a partner, or they're a principal in a software firm that divides its time between India and the U.S. And he's someone who's constantly and at times stays in the U.S., at times in India. So been a real international dimension is what I'm saying related to his career, which is what such a combination can give. And this is where, Kay and I used to talk about how the combinations given in the ancient texts have to be understood and updated, you might say, in the light of the modern day world. Because some of you may be aware that there's an unfavorable yoga talked about in Paladipika related to the 10th house, where if the 10th lord goes to a trick house, 6, 8, or 12, with the additional malefic influence on it, then this is referred to as a Dur-yoga, and could actually be an unfortunate combination related to the one's career. In the same way that the 11th lord and the 12th used to be viewed very unfavorably because the lord of gains in the 12th house is expenses. But of course, in that case, it can mean income from foreign sources. And I could show you many charts, including my own, where that's the case. So you have to, this is why I always say, when you're seeing a combination in a chart, you have to see what could be the favorable side of this. And of course, what could then be the unfavorable side. In this case, the favorable side is that he's had good success, Raja Yoga, in a foreign country when this was getting activated in the dasha sequence. With Mars in particular, the Yogacaraka planet, in Pushkar Navamsha. Now, which sign would it go into in Navamsha? Which sign would Mars go into?
Taurus, which is the 11th house of the
Taurus.
birth chart.
Taurus, which would be in the good 11th house, right? Correct. Now, again, there's a purpose that I really wanted to discuss this chart and this example here related to our topic today, Pushkar Navamsha. Where in this chart are there positions in Pushkar Navamsha? Yes.
It's
Lagna.
Lagna, right? So the first two charts I showed you were where the Lagna Lord was in Pushkar Navamsha. Here at 28 degrees of Aries, which makes the Navamsha Lagna Sagittarius, the good 9th house of this group chart. This ascending degree is in Pushkar Navamsha, and the principle that I was talking about in the article is that this helps. It's a favorable feature of any chart. It helps certainly, you say, boost up the quality of that chart. But is any other planet in Pushkar Navamsha?
Mercury?
Yes. Mercury is in the 3rd Navamsha of a Earth sign. So it places it in Pushkar Navamsha. And you're going to see in a moment why I selected this example in particular. But you'll see that this chart has many, many favorable features, right? What would be you might say, the most outstanding feature of this chart?
Maharaja Yoga, the 1st and 5th lord in
First
the 5th
lord
house.
goes to
Correct. So Maharaja Yoga, defined by when the 1st and 5th lord are either in the 1st or in the 5th or exchange. It requires that there be the additional influence of a natural benefic. There is in this case. And in what other ways does this combination in the 5th house get very favorably qualified?
Benefic hemming.
Very benefic hemming, right? You've got Jupiter in its exaltation sign on one side and Mercury in its exaltation sign on the other. So it's quite an interesting combination from that standpoint. This is a person who's been hugely successful in life, a woman doctor. Think about when she would have run the Mercury period based on the position of the moon. The moon, of course, is in whose nakshatra?
Saturn.
So she would have started life in the Saturn major period. And then, followed by who?
Mercury.
So she
So
got,
it would be,
go ahead.
it would be from somewhere from 18, from age of 18 to 35.
Very good. That's exactly, I think it was like 17 to 34, but very good. So, what's typically going on for a person during that time of life?
Professional
She got
education,
married at that time.
career.
She got married.
So
About
all-
21.
All these things. First of all, those are educational years, right?
Educational years, medical years.
They're years when she would have been getting established in her career, in typical time, particularly for an Indian woman, where she would have been marrying and having children. All these things took place during the Mercury major period. The fact that she might be studying medicine during this time. Mercury here is the sixth lord in the sixth house. But really, to see some of the other things that happen, marriage, for example, would not be real clear from the birth lagna, but see it from Chandra lagna, where Mercury becomes the seventh lord in the seventh house. Now, in this case, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to look at that, where does Mercury get placed in the Navamsha?
Pisces, the 12th house of the birth chart.
The 12th house of the birth chart. What combination in a chart do you see that would suggest that it would be her karma, her destiny to live abroad, settle abroad?
4-12 exchange.
Everyone should see that there's a 4-12 exchange here. So she graduated undergraduate in India and then did her medical degree in India, but then came to the US to do her residency and then just, stayed here and has been lived in the US ever since. What's interesting about this Mercury is what happens in Navamsha. Of course, at this degree, it's going to go to its devotation sign in the Navamsha, but what is happening here?
Neechbhanga Raj Yoga.
Well, yes, but mostly what I want people to see is that what causes the bhanga, the cancellation of the debility here.
Aspect of the debilitated Venus.
Good, Sandeep. So we have
Venus, both debilitated.
Yes, we have two debilitated planets that are in mutual glance of each other, which actually, if you read my article on Enigma Wrapped in a Mystery, where I was talking about when debilitated planets can give the results actually strongly, this is one of the instances, and I could show many examples of this. Just on a side note, Mercury gave her at least one child, maybe two children. I'd have to go back and check that. In what way, by what principle of Jyotish, and one that I refer to quite frequently, could Mercury be seen as being a planet that would give children? Actually, there's a couple different ways one could see that, well, at least in retrospect.
Mark, one is that Mercury goes into the Mercury's nakshatra lord is Sun, which is in the fifth house, the fifth lord. So he gives
Good.
the result.
I'm glad you see that. Its nakshatra lord is the Sun, which of course is the fifth lord in the fifth house. By maybe what other concept could Mercury be seen as being potentially giving children as well? Use Chandra Lagna. Who's the fifth lord?
Moon.
And then Mercury would be in a mutual glance with the fifth lord Moon. Right?
Yeah.
So, again, these kind of results in Mercury could have been, and they're very good results of Mercury in terms of educational achievement, professional attainment, professional success, marriage, childbirth, all these things happened in the Mercury major period and could have been predicted without the concept of Pushkar Navamsha. But I think the fact that this planet is in Pushkar Navamsha is an additional enhancement in terms of especially its ability to give its results strongly, which it certainly did.
Mark,
Mark,
can I ask a question
Sure.
on the so you have also mentioned it number of times in your video that K.N. Rao sir also used to say that the Karkamsha Lagna here is Aquarius and Mercury is the fifth lord from Aquarius. So I'm just curious, is there any inference that we can draw in terms of her education by the fifth lord of, from there? I mean, just curious.
Well, as you know, since you took my Germany courses, that one method favored by King and Rao by seeing, both the quality of the education and maybe what a person might end up studying, was by seeing influences on the fifth house, fifth lord from Karkamsha Lagna. So the AK here is, let's see, who would that be? Would that be Jupiter?
Jupiter, yeah, come on.
Jupiter.
Yes.
Right. So yes, Aquarius does become the Karkamsha Lagna. So yes, the fifth from there becomes Gemini, which the favorable thing there is it gets the aspect of its own lord, who's actually quite strong. Right. I don't know if you could have, if you would ever could have, well, moon aspects it as well. I don't know if you could have predicted medicine, as the field of study just based on that. But yes, this is a technique for looking at that, if that's your question.
Yes. Thank you.
Mark, one question related to this class. So the Mercury going to the 12th house of the birth chart. So do we have to interpret that as a success in the foreign countries? Is that why you are showing?
Well, no. Well, it flies in the face of the idea that if the Pushkar Navamsha planet position in the Navamsha is not a good house, right, in the birth chart, then its ability to give its more favorable fortune of results is according to that idea is reduced, right?
Right.
Mark,
again, to what degree that happened here is difficult.
There's something you were wanting to point out right in the beginning, when you said degree in the D9, but then I think we lost it in the conversation.
I didn't follow what you're saying, Sandeep.
Right in the beginning, Mark, there was you were about to point out where the planet in the D9 goes to, and something related to that with reference to the article.
Yeah, no. So what the article is bringing out was the idea that when you see a Pushkar Navamsha planet, you see what sign it falls in Navamsha. And then you see what sign that is in a house in the
Okay,
Rashi.
that's okay.
Yeah. And the idea is that if it's a good house being defined by angle trines 2 and 11, that's a favorable point. That if it's a trick house, not including the third house, a trick house, 6, 8, 12, then that's not said to be a favorable point. And again, I don't take any of these principles as being dogma. What I do is I research them, right? Or I try to see where they apply, where they seem not to apply, where they might get modified. This is actually a case where the Pushkar Navamsha planet is in a sign in Navamsha that is not a good house in the birth chart. It's the 12th house, right?
Mark, the one other thing on this is that the sequence of dashas is really, really unique, right? After Mercury, it's Ketu. Ketu gives results of Venus, followed by Sun. So you have a really good sequence of good 30, almost 40 years, and all combined in good yogas.
Yeah, this is an exceptional person. Actually, one of the finest people that I know, and just in terms of the quality of the person, the quality of their soul, and what they've been all about in their life, and what they've done with their life, and it's just really, really admirable. And
so
they have
Mark,
the birth chart to go with it.
You had made the case. It's similar to Bill Gates' chart, right? I think you had made the case that Dhan yogas, which are benefically hemmed, accentuate the Dhan yoga, right? In this case, it's the fifth house getting the focus of two benefics hemming.
Well, all the planets and the yogas involved in Leo and the fifth house in general. She has two exceptional sons, and both her and her husband are doctors, they're anesthesiologists. Both of their sons became surgeons. So they, achieved extremely well educationally in order to become that, and now they're surgeons, right? Which
one clue to maybe being her. Was she a surgeon? If she was, maybe because there is a Shara yoga.
No,
Is that-
no. She was not a surgeon. Okay,
But
I said
not that 4, 5, 6, 7 houses having planets.
her and her husband are anesthesiologists. Her
Is
sons.
Which is about arrows or something, right?
Am I breaking up?
It's all right.
Yeah, well, okay. All right. So anyway, this is an exceptional person, and you can see, exceptional quality of voice. And as Barminda pointed out, the dasha sequence really favored, right? Now, I like to highlight also with this chart, she ran the 20-year Venus period at, perfect time of life, 40s, 50s, she's now moved into the sun period, hugely successful in the Venus major period. Sun's doing extremely well. You'll notice the closeness in degrees between the sun and Venus. Sun's at 17.9 and Venus at 17.48. If you go, you might say rigidly, by the idea of saying this is an extremely combust Venus and incapable of giving its results, you'd go completely wrong. And it was after observing such planets that I wrote that article some of you have seen called the Icarus Factor, where I bring in the idea that when a planet gets so close to the sun like this, rather than being burnt or combust, it actually sort of becomes something of a powerhouse.
Kazemi.
It's a principle that's referred to in Arabian astrology as Kazemi. And I've found really good evidence for this, and gave a bunch of examples in that article. And now here you see this, and this would support that idea as well. Okay, going on here. Venus is the seventh lord of that chart. She has an exceptional husband. Look at this chart. There's one graha in Pushkar Navamsha. Can you find it? Anyone? Is there no planet here in Pushkar Navamsha?
Ascendant Mars.
Yes, ascendant.
No, not ascendant. Sorry, I'm sorry. I think it missed. It missed because it's the first and the third. Ascendant is in the second Navamsha. So
No. Yes, right. It's in the second Navamsha, so it does miss it. It have to be 640, past 640 to be in the third Navamsha. So no, that's not what I'm referring to here. There is one graha in Pushkar Navamsha, however.
Venus, is it Venus?
Is that someone I heard someone say?
K2, maybe, no?
K2, Miriam.
K2.
K2, because it's in the first Navamsha of a water sign.
Yes.
What sign would it go to then in Navamsha?
It'll be in Cancer, in a water sign.
And see how favorable house Cancer is in the birth chart.
Yes.
Ninth
house.
Ninth house. This woman, this is a Russian student of mine, Russian woman, has been running her moon period, getting towards the end of it. And if someone came to you and just showed you their chart, this chart, and you saw that they were moving into the moon period and that they were a married Russian woman, say in her mid-30s, maybe early 30s, what might some of the things that you would predict for this moon period?
Children.
Say again, Sandeep.
Children, Mark.
Why children?
Moon is in the 9th house, which is 5th from the 5th. Then it's with Jupiter, which is the Taraka for children. So
In which house? In which house does Jupiter rule?
5th house. Yeah.
House. Yeah.
Is there any blemish on this combination?
None.
None.
None. Amazing.
Now come,
None.
now come to Ketu. Come to
Moon is
Ketu.
my God.
Come to Ketu. Who
The results of Jupiter.
whose results does Ketu give?
Jupiter.
In 3 ways. What 3 ways does it
Jupiter.
give? What
Nakshatra of Jupiter, sign of Jupiter, and aspected by Jupiter.
By Jupiter 3 times.
Right. Right. So as I mentioned, this is a student of mine from Russia who I've gotten to know. They actually host me when I come to Moscow. And so we've, become we stay in touch. She lets me know what's happening in her life. And when she was about to move into the Moon Ketu period, I asked her to think about what it could give and why. And I told her then when she gave me her answer, I would fill in anything that I thought she might be missing. And so she gave a good answer. She's a good student of Jyotish, but she didn't mention children. And I made some comment, semi-serious comment that, if she didn't want more children, she has 3 already, she had 2 in the moon period already, then she would need to be careful about that. Well, karma is karma. And she notified me some weeks ago that, quite to her surprise, and certainly not planned, she's pregnant. My joke back to her, because she knows this idea that planets in Pushkar Navamsha can give their results easily. In her case, it made her easily pregnant. But you can see how strongly that potential is with Ketu in the 5th house. Giving results of Jupiter, the 5th lord, in 3 ways. Right? Following the 9th from Chandra Lagna and also Dasha Lagna in this case, no malefic influence on that Ketu either. Right? So it gave these results, and she's now about to have another child.
And even after Ketu, the sequence is amazing.
She has 3 sons. She's now hoping for a female, a girl. She asked me about the prospect of that. It's not an easy thing to determine, but we'll see. She wouldn't actually give birth in Moon Ketu. She would give birth in Moon Venus, which brings me to another principle. I wrote this article called Intimate Connections, right? We're talking about planets in Kendra Sambandha to each other. Notice that, this Jupiter Moon are in Kendra Sambandha, particularly Jupiter, the 5th lord, with Venus. And if I showed you Saptamsha, which I'm not showing you here, you'll see that Moon and Venus are Sambandha with each other in the Saptamsha.
Mark, is Pushkar Navamsha considered a source of strength, or just that it brings more positive things?
Source of strength. In fact, that's the most reliable way to think about it. Because if you think about it as being some planet that will always bring good fortune, you'll go wrong. But if you think about it as a planet that has an ability to give its results easily, strongly, as I said, in this sense, it's not identical to, but it's somewhat akin to a Vargotama planet. Vargotama planet's the same thing, just it gives its results strongly. Doesn't mean those results are always favorable. It will give those results strongly, whatever those results are.
Thank you.
Mark,
So, Mark, would it be right to say you use 2 different words? Vargotama strongly, yes, that's what you taught us. And for Pushkar Navamsha, you've been using a word, result. It gives results easily. So can one assume there are less obstacles? It happens a little more smoothly. Things come to you, or they would be positive.
Well, no, well, it means exactly what it means, but again, those easy results it could give could be unfavorable results. Easily and strong does not mean favorable. Easily and strong does not mean favorable.
Oh, so if it's in a trick house, it still may kind of bring the trick themes as it gives the results.
Well, you read the article, right? I showed the chart of Mahatma Gandhi, who has 3 planets, Jupiter, Venus, and Mars, all in Pushkar Navamsha, right? And when he ran that sequence, the result it gave very easily was his death for the reasons that I outlined there. Okay? So,
Mark, just a quick comment on the chart before we move on. So, you said the Ketu is in the 5th house, and one of the obvious things that would come is children, which kind of makes sense. And Jupiter.
if the time of life permits that.
Correct. But you also said something, and I wanted to say, I think it's almost like a parallel theme, right? 5th house also is, and Ketu there could also be mantra diksha, and those kind of things. So do you see those as happening? Let's say if you made predictions, right? Would you say both were simultaneously possible? Because if you look at the sequence of dashas, Ketu is giving it now, then you have a couple of very good, I would call worldly attainment kind of deals, right? Like coming through, and then Jupiter coming later in life would again bring the spiritual theme really high and strong, because it's a very strong, well-placed Jupiter.
Right. So, when she moved into the moon period, very predictably, she got very spiritual, very religiously oriented. She became a student of Jyotish. A teacher came into her life, and Moon Jupiter, you're looking at him, right? She's gotten very involved in the Indian spiritual tradition, studies the sacred scriptures such as Bhagavad Gita, has gone to pilgrimage during this time. You see this as long distance travel. Went to Rao's school, participated in the international program, visited many temples, participated in pujas and yagyas, so all that, right, is manifesting. And when she herself interpreted the K2 subperiod, and I acknowledged it, these themes are going to be brought out very strongly, and they have been. But a much more mundane theme also was potential, which happened. Right? Does this answer your question?
Yeah, Mark, but I think it's followed by Mars and Rahu, and then which are kind of more mundane and worldly attainments. Like they're very good configurations, but less on the spiritual side, right? So it's almost like it initiates it, but then you're going through life and it'll be more on this side. But then when Jupiter hits, you're now going to go change direction, right? Literally, or does it pronounce the spiritual?
Right, and at that point, well, I don't know about this last child, but her children will have been raised, right? You're saying that when she runs the Jupiter major period, it will be a period where she'll strongly turn towards the divine, maybe be involved in some teaching activities of her own. The answer is absolutely yes.
Correct.
Very, very. She's an innately religious soul. Innately religious soul. And you can see that.
Mark, could it also be because the Ketu is in Pisces, the moksha house, and Ketu being a moksha karaka?
No, of course. All the factors add up here, right? I mean, you've all heard me, maybe some of you have heard me talk about, Ketu doesn't become a moksha karaka in every chart. It doesn't incline a person towards moksha or interest in moksha. It only does so when it gets, quote, spiritualized. And one of the ways it gets spiritualized is when it's under the influence of Jupiter, particularly a Jupiter like this. And when it's in a moksha sign, which it is. And when it goes to the 5th or the 9th house, which it is. So you have, multiple factors that spiritualize this Ketu.
And Mark, at the same time, even Rahu is placed very well for its significations, because Rahu is in the 11th house, in the Artha house. And, this is a very good axis, the Virgo.
Okay. So I want to go on because there's other charts I want to discuss. We spent probably more time than I really wanted to on this chart, but I want to go on here. And again, there's always specific things in mind about why I'm showing a particular chart. So there are two planets here in Pushkar Navamsha. See if you can identify them.
Sun is one of them.
Correct, Sun. And she's a good writer, okay? She's a lawyer who, during her law period of studying law, which was in her Saturn major period, she wrote for the Law Review, which is something that here in the U.S. is considered an honor, sort of a feather in your cap. And she's a good writer, right? And so, one of the, and that's particularly important here because Pushkar Navamsha placement is particularly
Jupiter
important.
would be another one.
Now, hold on, please don't interrupt when I'm trying to expose something here. The Sun will go to its debilitation sign in Navamsha, meaning it has some weakness in Navamsha, right? But it's been of interest to me in the same way that, certain things can help a debilitated planet actually to give its response more strongly. I've been investigating whether a planet in debilitation in, say, Navamsha, but in Pushkar Navamsha, does that help redeem it somewhat? But then someone mentioned, and this is what I want to talk about mostly with regards to the chart, this Jupiter is in Pushkar Navamsha, right?
Is K2 also?
Yes.
It's in the, what? It's in the 6th of a air sign, so yes, right? So we have 3 planets. I was mistaken. We have 3 planets in Pushkar Navamsha. But focusing on Jupiter, folks. See the degrees of the moon in Gemini. In what period was she born?
Rahu.
Rahu, but then fairly early she moved into Jupiter, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now you see this Jupiter, it's in the 8th house. It's retrograde. It's in its debilitation sign, right? Those would all not be considered favorable factors. The favorable factor, one favorable factor gets aspected by the natural benefic Venus, who's the 5th lord, right? And it is in this Pushkar Navamsha, but where would it go in Navamsha? What sign would Jupiter go?
8th house. 8th house, it will go to Gemini again.
No.
It goes to Taurus, the 12th house of the birth chart.
Yes.
Sorry.
Goes to Taurus, which is not a good house in the birth chart. So come to the Jupiter-Saturn period, when they were in their very early teens, right? Middle school here in the U.S. Now, some of you may be aware I'm going to be teaching a course soon, actually starting next week, on the astrology of mental emotional illness, right? And one of the things that's going to be highlighted is influences on the 5th house, 5th lord. And what influences do we see here on the 5th house of an unfavorable nature?
Ketu. Saturn being the 8th in the 5th exalted.
We have the first thing to see, of course, Saturn, which has a couple different sides to it. It's the 9th lord and the 5th. She got good educational success and her law degree during the Saturn major period. But it's also the 8th lord. But it's the natural malefic Saturn under the influence of the Rahu-Ketu axes. And you can see that Saturn is also aspecting the 5th lord Venus. Everyone see this? So there's this influence of Saturn on the 5th house, 5th lord. And so this can create some mental emotional disturbance and turn a person towards depression. Someone has not muted their mic. I hear a conversation going on in the background. Could you please be courteous and mute your mic? And then at the same time when she was running this Jupiter-Saturn period, Saturn was going over the moon by transit. She was in the Sadisat. Okay. And she actually went through a period of mental illness, you might say, major depressive episode. a high level of anxiety, came under the treatment of psychiatrists, needed, medication to get through this period. So, I show this as an example of not a planet not in a particularly good condition, though in Pushkar Navamsha, but in a Pushkar Navamsha whose sign is Taurus, which is the 12th house of the birth chart, where simultaneously then she comes to the Cis-Saturn sub-period simultaneously with the Sadhisat and goes through a real challenging period in terms of mental emotional health. Do you see?
Mark, is this also related to children in any way?
Well, interestingly enough, I made a prediction that this person would have a child in Saturn Venus, which they did. And it's a good example of that. You can have affliction to the 5th house, 5th lord. You can run those planets and they can still give you a child, which they did. I predicted additional children in the Saturn native period, and she's now 6-7 weeks pregnant. And will give birth to another child in Saturn here.
Mark, in this case, would we say that, since everything repeats from the Chandra Lagna as well, because Moon is in the Lagna, the karmas become a little more dridha compared to other charts where, let's say, things don't repeat from the Moon, and so the results are weaker?
Well, it's a confluent picture because, as you said, Chandra Lagna and Birth Lagna are the same. It just means that whatever are the patterns, they are, very consistent. They're patterns that, are going to play themselves out and not really have a contrasting side to them that might look from a different picture from Chandra Lagna. It just there's a greater emphasis on whatever are the patterns at birth and what results, both in terms of static potential and then dynamically when they get activated, what that can mean. All right, going on here, folks. Who's the planet, just one, in Pushkar Navamsha here?
Jupiter.
Jupiter.
Jupiter is in the 3rd Navamsha of a water sign, so it's in Pushkar Navamsha, right? And any other planet in Pushkar Navamsha?
Rahu.
Rahu is also in Pushkar Navamsha, and I want to focus in on Rahu. This person is very well known to me. They have just recently come out of their 18-year Rahu period. And, well, actually, let me just go on a little tangent. A thumb rule that Rao used to teach is that Rahu in the 3rd house or the 11th house can make you either the youngest or the oldest among your siblings or siblings of the same sex. She was the oldest of 3 siblings with Rahu in the 3rd here. That's just a little aside. How would you judge the results of Rahu here, and what might be some unfavorable results that you could judge of Rahu giving here, and how would you see that? First of all, how just generally would you predict the results of Rahu in its major period?
Mark, what I am inclined to say, this is the first thought that came in my mind about when I saw this and you mentioned about Saturn and Rahu, that the dispositor of Rahu is in the 10th house in a good dignity, although retrograde. But I still feel, and these are just my initial thought, that this, and because Rahu is in the 3rd house of entrepreneurship also, and it is also an Upachaya house, it may have, what occurs to me is that it could have done better for this person, or this person could have had some positive connotations for work, or this person would have turned kind of an entrepreneur. That.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
But Rahu is in the nakshatra Jupiter, which is the Lagna Lord in the 4th, with Moon giving a Kesari yoga, so even that could play out. Jupiter Saturn also form a 1-2 Dhani yoga, so that's another dimension.
Get involved in acting.
Okay, it's in the third house.
And from the strong Chandra Lagna, Rahu goes to the 12th house. That could also play out.
So people are seeing different things and what they can mean. And she, during the whole Rahu period, she was very prosperous. Okay, living in very affluent circumstances, living in beautiful homes in Southern California. So, there was this quality of it. But does anyone see why this Rahu period could have brought really challenging health problems? Really challenging health problems.
It falls in the 12th house from the Chandra Lagna.
Well, that alone wouldn't give health problems. What you have to see here.
The disposital of Rahu is in 8th position from 8th house from the Rahu.
Yes, and that's made the Rahu Saturn period and sub-period extremely challenging this way. So this is a good observation. What I want people to see is this principle again that you referred to frequently that I call U's clue. Now, whose results does Rahu give? Of course, it gives Saturn's results. Some of you just took medical astrology from me. Saturn is a primary marker for this Lagna. Okay? It's also a natural malefic as a Maraka, a retrograde natural malefic Maraka, aspecting the Lagna Lord Jupiter. This Lagna Lord Jupiter, hold on. This Lagna Lord Jupiter is well placed in the 4th house in its own sign, but see that there's malefic hemming also on both sides. And yes, it's forming a Kesari yoga with the moon, but this moon is a very malignant 8th lord. Malignant, why? It's Gandanta. It could hardly be darker, right? So this is a combination of the 1st lord, Jupiter, with the 8th lord, hemmed by natural malefics, aspected closely in degrees by Saturn, a retrograde malefic, who is a Maraka 2nd lord. Rahu is giving these results because its sign lord is Saturn and its nakshatra lord is Jupiter. Do you see this?
Yes,
now,
yes.
Now, Rahu is also in Pushkar Navamsha, but in what sign does it go in Navamsha?
Taurus, the 6th house of the birth chart.
Which is the 6th house of the birth chart. I won't go into detail, but this person at times thought they were dying in the Rahu period. Just terrible, consistent health problems of it, just a whole variety of things that seems to, the medical establishments have not been able to establish a definite diagnosis of and have not been able to help.
And on top of that, Jupiter is the 64th Navamsha Lord.
Okay. Now, she just moved into her Jupiter Mahadasha. Will it be better health-wise? One person who didn't know Jyotish very well led her to believe that just because she moved in her Jupiter period, and Jupiter is the Lagna Lord in its own sign, that all her health problems were going to go away. As I said, they didn't know Jyotish very well. Unfortunately for her, she's a dear soul. I love her quite a bit. I've known her for 50 years, her and her husband. But she suffers from her health. And you have to see these things that I just outlined in order to be able to see that. Because these combinations have had different sides to them too. When K and Rao taught here in the area, when I brought him here to teach, he stayed in these people's home, and he talked about their home being like a temple. It has all these, religious icons, in it. It's a beautiful home, and they acquired these homes in their moon period.
So Mark, can I make a comment here? So the question about how would Jupiter period be, right? So totally agree with why Rahu and Saturn, what the issue might be and why that might be a bad period. But from a relative comparison, Jupiter is Lagna Lord. It is Jupiter. It is in a Kendra, not retrograde, right? So wouldn't you then be inclined to say, yes, it is definitely a better period? I won't say issues go away, right? That might be a deeper thought, but just looking at what
Whose
you can,
nakshatra is it in?
right?
Saturn.
Saturn. So it's giving Saturn. Okay.
I hope to God that it is better. And it could qualitatively be better. I'm not that optimistic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, no, take away, hey, hold on, take away these things. Is this is a Lagna Lord just in Pisces in its own sign, no influence of Saturn, no hemming, not with a malignant eighth Lord, then it's beautiful. But that's simply not the case, unfortunately.
Mark, what's interesting is that after Jupiter comes Saturn.
Yes, well, she's going to turn 70 years old in May. This person was born just a month away from me. All the planetary placements except the moon are exactly the same. Okay. So I'm very familiar with these planetary placements. Jupiter, in my case, is the seventh lord, and as many of you know, I never married. Okay. I have the same situation. The strong aspect of Saturn is now the sixth lord, the seventh house is hemmed. You can have a planet like this, strong in its own sign, even a natural benefic, but then what else is going on with it? I would be surprised. Hold on. I would be surprised if she survives her Jupiter major period. That would take her to age 86. And I don't think she would want to continue to survive under the conditions in which she's been living in terms of what she suffers with health-wise. But yes, of course, if she makes it to Saturn, well, then Saturn becomes a very clear primary Maraka.
Mark, can I make a small observation? Maybe she can do better if she turns spiritual, more spiritual, because this is a Vrinchi yoga. She has a Vrinchi yoga.
Hold on. She couldn't turn any more spiritual than she is. Okay. Since the age of 20, she's been not only, just completely dedicated on the path of yoga, her and her husband, but they've been teaching, she's an ordained Swami. She could not turn any more spiritual than she is. Okay. But I'm glad you see that there is, Vrinchi yoga here that does get activated.
Jupiter, Saturn, and fifth lord.
Right, there is Vrinchi yoga here. Right? Rahu activated that. Jupiter will activate that. This will be a continued thing, no question. Good for you for seeing that.
Thanks, man.
All right, so I did, in the interest of time here, I'm going to now look at some charts again of well-known people. Barack Obama, as you should all be aware by now, and I predicted it, became president of the United States in his Jupiter moon period. It's a classic example of how Jupiter, as an impressionable 12th lord, will give the results of the stronger category of house lords that it's with, which is, of course, Saturn giving Sasha Yoga here as a Vargotama, Lagna lord in the Lagna, in a mutual glance with the 9th lord, forming a 1-9 Raja Yoga, with Jupiter giving that result as an impressionable 12th lord. Of course, it's also a Nicha Banga Raja Yoga planet. It's a planet that is Nicha, that gets a strong cancellation, Banga, who's also in an angle, so it gives Nicha Banga Raja Yoga. Moon and Jupiter involved in a Gauri Yoga, right? It wasn't Jupiter Moon that he became the president. Which nakshatra does Jupiter, which sign in the Navamsha did Jupiter go into?
Exaltation sign of Cancer.
No, goes into
Pisces?
Pisces. Goes into Pisces.
Pisces.
Its
Oh,
own
I'm
sign.
sorry.
So
Yeah,
it's not
sorry.
it's not a weak Jupiter at all. All his political rise happened in the Jupiter Mahadasha. But of course, at 732, it puts it in the third Navamsha of a water sign. So it's also Pushkar Navamsha. Right?
So you mean, are you talking about Jupiter, Mark?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Jupiter wouldn't be Pushkar Navamsha, right? It's the earth sign. So
Third Navamsha is Pushkar Navamsha.
yeah,
So it
earth
isn't.
sign, not the yeah.
First,
Right.
first and third of water. I'm sorry, third and fifth of
Yeah, it's
Earth.
earth sign.
So it's Pushkar Navamsha.
It's Pushkar Navamsha.
Third of Earth. Yes?
Yes, yeah, got it. Thanks.
And then Albert Einstein. Incredible chart, of course. Does anybody know, Rao spent a lot of time trying to determine which planets relate to which subjects. And, one of his students, Naval Singh, faculty member of his, wrote a book called Planets in Education, very worthwhile read. All the information really comes from Rao. Gives a table that shows what grahas relate to which types of subjects. What rules mathematics and physics? Anybody have an idea?
Mercury and Rahu.
No.
Sun.
Sun. Right? Now, what's good about this sun? Just in terms
Pushkar
of
Navamsha.
Pushkar Navamsha.
It is in Pushkar Navamsha, but besides being in Pushkar Navamsha.
Vargottama and directional strength.
Directional strength. It gets
No.
directional strength.
Exaltation sign.
No, it's not Vargottama, folks, but it is getting directional
Cancer
strength
in Navamsha.
in the 10th house, right? It's directional strength in the 10th house. Where would it go? It's in Pushkar Navamsha, in the first Navamsha of a water sign. So it goes where in Navamsha?
Cancer.
Cancer. Decent house, second house, right? When he ran his sun major period, last sub-period, Venus, is when he won the Nobel Prize for Theoretical Physics. Some may recognize the name Al Gore. He was the vice president in the Clinton administration, 8 years vice president, and then became the Democratic candidate in the 2000 election. I predicted that his opponent Bush would win. It was one of the closest elections in US history. Some said he actually probably won the election and it was stolen from him by some things that happened in Florida. But nonetheless, he didn't become president, but he was vice president for 8 years. And this happened exactly after moving into the Rahu major period. Exactly after the moving into the Rahu major period. At 21 degrees of Aries, what should we notice about his Rahu?
Pushkar Bhaga.
Pushkar Navamsha, Pushkar Bhag.
Yep.
And whose results does Rahu give?
Mars.
Mars's results, right? And of course, Mars is the Yogacaraka planet in the first house, forming Nichabanga Raja Yoga, right? Gets its stability canceled because it's with its exaltation lord. So, and then which sign would Rahu go into in Navamsha?
Fourth house, Libra.
Fourth house, Libra, good fourth house. Probably a very excellent example of how a planet being in Pushkar Navamsha, in this case, this particular kind of planet, really was a very fortunate thing and boost up in Rahu's ability to give the result that it did. Now, some of you may recognize this name. This is an old-time movie star. He had his heyday back in the 1930s and 40s. Huge Hollywood star. Planets in Pushkar Navamsha? Any?
Moon.
Moon, who else?
Venus.
Venus. So Moon, of course, is the fourth lord. And of course, it's with the natural benefic Venus. Does Venus have a source of strength here in the birth chart?
Yes, exalted in Navamsa.
Yes, it's exchange with there is an exchange.
Right.
Yeah.
I asked in the birth chart. We'll see Navamsha in a moment.
Sorry.
With Mercury.
But in the birth chart, it's in exchange with Mercury. Of course, you can see these planets fall in the third house of performing arts. Of course, Venus is the artistic planet to begin with. Mercury, the third lord, is involved in this exchange, right? Fourth house. He had very palatial homes like many Hollywood movie stars. And, there's a interesting sutra in Jaimini that says from the Karakamsha Lagna, if the moon and Venus are there, then a person lives in a palatial home, and that it could also make one a sailor. So Saturn at 2850 is the Amakaraka, and it's Vargotama, therefore the Karakamsha Lagna is Pisces, and this moon-Venus combination falls in the fourth house. And of course, I just mentioned he had a palatial home, but he was also very big into sailing. He had a very famous yacht, sailing vehicle that, was really kind of one of his prized possessions and one he spent, a lot of time with and on. And of course, Venus is the seventh lord here. He was a very famous lover, very someone who, was known for his amorous adventures, you might say. So you can see here, my point is that the moon and Venus here are giving very strong results. Now, what's extraordinary about his chart, I mentioned in the article that when you have a lot of planets in Pushkar Navamsha or in Vargotama conditions in the Navamsha or other good dignities, then it really raises up the quality of a horoscope. Look at this Navamsha. Saturn, Vargotama, Venus exalted, Mars in its own sign, Moon exalted. So see that both of his Pushkar Navamsha planets in the birth chart get their exaltation sign in Navamsha. Jupiter, Vargotama, Mercury exalted. Only the Sun, Rahu, and Ketu do not have an exceptional condition in his Navamsha. The result is that any yogas that these planets are involved in the birth chart will give the results extremely powerfully. Mercury was the major period that brought him his greatest stardom, his greatest fame as an actor. So you see this here. So this is what I wanted to share with you. And it shows specific examples to kind of bring home the point that are made towards the end of the article, that you can't say that a planet's going to give good fortune just because it's in Pushkar Navamsha. You'll go wrong with that. You have to, like any planet, just like an exalted planet won't always give good results. You have to evaluate all of the factors that are coming into play there. And in particular, this factor about what sign it's in Navamsha and what sign, pertains to which house in the Rashi. But even then, I showed some examples that you can't get overly dogmatic about that. Right? So your takeaway from this is that I recommend you do what I do, meaning that when you're evaluating what kind of results a planet can give, among all the other things you're considering, you should consider whether it's in Pushkar Navamsha. Right? So this is what, again, I had to share with you. I'll open it up to any general questions on this topic before we conclude.
So Mark, to conclude, or to just draw an inference, Pushkar Navamsha is an enabler like a lot of others on a depending on what the confluence and the conditions of the planet and what yogas it is in, if it is also in a Pushkar Bhaga or a Pushkar Navamsha, it's a further enabler of whatever is.
I think that's a general. So, for example, you've all learned to identify yogas, but then the real important addition to that is qualifying the yoga. Because there's yogas that'll be no fruit yogas. There are yogas that'll be partial fruit yogas. There's going to be yogas that'll be full fruit yogas. And how do we judge that? A lot of that has to do with strengths of planets, right? And so if a planet's involved in a particular yoga and then is also in Pushkar Navamsha, I would see that in the same way that I would see that planet's also Vargotama. Meaning it would be an additional favorable qualification that would enable that yoga to give its results easily and strongly. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question, Mark. Suppose that especially Rahu and Ketu, if it is in Pushkar Navamsa and if they are alone and in Pushkar Navamsa, or maybe Vargotama also, then what type of result generally they give, because they are shadow planets?
Well, see, that's the thing. And I showed examples of that. I showed an example of that woman who was having all the children. Ketu was her in Pushkar Navamsha, and I showed the chart recently of the woman who was experiencing all kinds of health problems in Rahu. Like any time you're interpreting Ketu and Rahu, it has so much to do with, because they are Chayagrahas and give the results of the planets with which they're most associated, then you have to see what those associations are, what those results are, before you pronounce any results about Rahu and Ketu, regardless of whether it's in a Pushkar Navamsha. Pushkar Navamsha would just simply mean that it's going to be able to give those results strongly, whatever those results are. In other words, you don't make an interpretation about a planet just based on Pushkar Navamsha. That's the bottom line. Although this is what I see happening a bit in the world of Jyotish.
Exactly, Mark. Because I think there is this thing out in the YouTube world that Pushkar Navamsha planets are always going to be this bestower of would be the
this is one of the reasons I wrote this article, because there is that sort of phenomena happening on YouTube, like so many other things that are misinformation about Jyotish on YouTube. One more question before we conclude with our prayer, if there is one. Then we'll conclude. Asatoma sagamaya tamatoma jyotirgamaya mityuma mitam gamaya sarvesham swasti bhavatu sarvesham shanti bhavatu sarvesham purnam bhavatu sarvesham mangalam bhavatu loka samasta sukhino bhavantu om shahanti 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 hari om tat sat. So take care, everyone. Be well, and look forward to the next article. Until we all meet again, namaste.